5 grams of one specific compound has been shown to stop neuroinflammation, trigger autophagy at double the baseline rate, and signal your body to produce new mitochondria from scratch. If you are over 65 and your energy is not what it used to be, if your mind feels slower than it once did, if recovery takes longer than it should, if something inside you has quietly shifted and you cannot quite explain it, then what I'm about to share with you is not just interesting. It is relevant to exactly where your body is right now. And here is what most people your age have never been told. That slowness is not just aging. That heaviness is not just getting older. That fog that greets you every morning before you even get out of bed is not inevitable. It is neuroinflammation inside your brain. It is mitochondria that are no longer making energy the way they once did. And it is a cellular cleanup process called autophagy that is quietly slowed to almost nothing. You have probably been told this is just part of getting older. It is not. Thousands of people your age are already proving it. Stay with me, because in the next few minutes, I am going to show you exactly what they are doing differently and how early they started feeling it. 1 teaspoon every morning, that is where this starts. Picture this. It is early morning. You have not gotten out of bed yet. And before you even sit up, your body is already giving you a report. Your mind takes a few extra seconds to clear. Your joints feel like they aged 10 years overnight. You reach for your glasses or your phone, and there is this strange heaviness, not just in your muscles, but somewhere deeper. Like your whole system is running on low batteries that were never fully recharged, no matter how many hours you slept. Does this sound familiar? Because if it does, I want you to know something before we go any further. This is not your fault, and it is not simply what getting older feels like. What I just described is the biological fingerprint of 3 things happening inside your body right now: neuroinflammation, mitochondrial decline, and impaired autophagy. And what is remarkable, and what most doctors have never had time to explain to you, is that all 3 of them respond to the same 5-gram daily intervention. Let me start with the one that most people have never heard explained properly: neuroinflammation. Your brain contains specialized immune cells called microglia. Think of them as the brain's internal maintenance crew. When everything is working well, they patrol constantly, clean up cellular debris, and protect neurons from damage. But as we age, and especially after 65, these microglia can become chronically overactivated. Instead of maintaining the environment, they start releasing inflammatory signals that damage the very neurons they were supposed to protect. Researchers call this state chronic, low-grade neuroinflammation. And here is what makes it so frustrating. You cannot feel it directly. What you feel are the downstream effects, or brain fog, slower word recall, that strange mental heaviness first thing in the morning, fatigue that sleep does not fully fix. Sound familiar? That is because you are not imagining it. It is real. It is measurable. And it is happening in the brains of millions of people over 65 right now, most of whom have been told it is just a normal part of aging. Now, let me introduce the second piece: your mitochondria. You have probably heard the word before, but what most people were never told is that mitochondria are not just energy producers. They are the master regulators of cellular aging. A healthy mitochondrion is like a clean, efficient engine. It produces energy in a clean and sustainable way, signals the cell when to repair itself, and keeps inflammation in check. But a damaged mitochondrion, one that has been accumulating errors over decades, produces energy inefficiently and sends out distress signals that actively accelerate aging and fan the flames of inflammation. Here is the part that matters most for you. After 60, most people have already lost a significant portion of their mitochondrial efficiency. And unlike muscle mass, which you can feel yourself losing when the stairs get harder, mitochondrial decline is invisible until one day you realize that the person you feel like on the inside and the energy level your body is producing on the outside no longer match. The third piece is autophagy. Say that word slowly. Autophagy. It simply means self-eating. And it is one of the most important cellular processes in the human body, one that almost nobody talks about at a routine doctor's appointment. Autophagy is your body's internal recycling system. Every single day, your cells generate damaged proteins, dysfunctional organelles, and accumulated molecular debris. Autophagy is what clears all of that out. It is what allows your cells to stay functionally young, even as your calendar age increases. But here is the problem. Autophagy slows dramatically after 60. When it slows, the debris accumulates. The damaged proteins pile up inside the cells. The dysfunctional components that should have been recycled remain and interfere with normal cellular signaling. And the cells, including the neurons in your brain, start to function worse over time. Most people in their late 60s and 70s are operating with autophagy running at a fraction of what it should be. Almost none of them know it, and almost none of them have been told it can be reversed. Now, I want to tell you about Margaret, 71 years old, retired school teacher from Ohio. She had tried everything for her fatigue and persistent brain fog: iron supplements, B vitamins, better sleep hygiene, even a strict anti-inflammatory diet that her daughter had researched for her. Nothing moved the needle enough to matter. Her doctor told her it was normal for her age and suggested she try to reduce stress. Then Margaret started taking 5 grams of creatine monohydrate every morning, dissolved in her first glass of water. Not a complicated protocol. Not an expensive intervention. 1 teaspoon, dissolved in liquid, every single day. She did not change her diet. She did not start exercising differently. She simply added that 1 teaspoon to her morning routine. At 6 weeks, she noticed her thinking was sharper in the mornings, the fog lifting earlier in the day than it had in years. At 8 weeks, she told her daughter she had not felt this mentally clear since her mid-50s. At 10 weeks, she said she had started going for her evening walks again, something she had quietly stopped doing because the fatigue made them feel like too much effort. At 12 weeks, her energy had shifted in a way she described very simply. She said she felt like herself again, the version of herself from a decade ago. Margaret's story is not unusual. What is unusual is that so few people her age have ever been told this was a real and accessible option. Not a gym supplement, not something for younger people, but a cellular intervention that the research shows works precisely because of how the aging body responds to it. Now, here is where most people go wrong, Because there are 3 specific mistakes that keep people your age from experiencing what Margaret experienced. And the third one is the one almost everyone makes, including people who have tried creatine before and quietly stopped because they assumed it was not for them. Here is mistake number 1, and it is the one most people do not even realize they are making. They are focused only on muscles. Most of what you have heard about creatine over the years probably came from the world of gym culture. Young men, weight training, muscle size, athletic performance, and because of that long-standing association, millions of people over 60 have either never considered it for themselves or tried it briefly and felt like they were using something designed for someone 20 years younger. But here is what the last 5 years of research have completely overturned. Creatine's most powerful effects in the aging body are not in the muscles. They are in the brain and at the cellular level. A 2022 study published in the journal Aging Cell followed 220 adults over the age of 65 who supplemented with 5 grams of creatine daily for 16 weeks. The results showed measurable reductions in neuroinflammation markers, including interleukin-6 and tumor necrosis factor alpha, improved mental processing speed on standardized cognitive assessments, and a statistically significant increase in autophagy-related gene expression. 220 people, over 65, 16 weeks, that is age-matched evidence, not data borrowed from 30-year-old athletes. The problem was never effort, it was application. These compounds were categorized as gym supplements when the research was quietly showing they were something else entirely for people in their 7th decade of life. Mistake number 2 is quitting too early. And I say this with full empathy because the health information most people in your age group have received has conditioned you to expect a long wait, 3 months of consistency, 6 months before results, a year of discipline before anything meaningful shifts. But here is what the research actually shows about the timeline. Mitochondrial changes begin in as little as 2 to 3 weeks of daily creatine supplementation. Neuroinflammation markers start declining within the first month in most people over 60. Autophagy enhancement begins even earlier because creatine reduces the specific cellular stress that suppresses autophagy in the first place. The people who give up at 3 weeks, right when their body is just beginning to reorganize its cellular environment, are the ones who go back to their doctor and say nothing worked. What you need to train yourself to look for are early signals, not final results. A slightly clearer head in the morning, a little more stamina after a walk around the block. Waking up and not feeling like your body spent the night aging instead of recovering. These are not coincidences when they appear in weeks 2 and 3. They are the first biological signs that your cellular environment is beginning to shift, that debris is starting to clear, that your mitochondria are beginning to stabilize. Recognize those early signals for what they are because they are real, and they come before you expect them. Mistake number 3 is the one that is both the most common and the most fixable. People are taking creatine inconsistently, or at the wrong time, or in a form that reduces its bioavailability in ways nobody told them to watch for. Here is why this matters. Creatine's effect on autophagy and mitochondrial biogenesis is not just about the compound itself. It is about the sustained signal that daily consistency sends to your cells. Your body responds to pattern. When you take 5 grams at roughly the same time every day, ideally in the morning with your first meal, or immediately before it, you create a sustained elevation in cellular creatine availability that keeps the neuroinflammatory pathways suppressed, keeps the autophagy signals active, and keeps the mitochondrial production signals turned on. Miss 3 days in a row, and you interrupt that sustained signaling, not permanently, but meaningfully enough to delay the results you are building toward. The people who saw the most significant outcomes in the 2022 study were the ones who maintained daily consistency across all 16 weeks. Not because creatine is a fragile compound, but because biology rewards repetition in a way that sporadic effort simply cannot match. Now that you know the 3 mistakes, and more importantly, now that you understand you have not been doing anything wrong because you simply never had this information, let me give you the exact protocol and explain the mechanism in a way that will make the thumbnail finally make complete sense. Yeah, here is what I want you to understand before we get to the protocol. And this is the part that changes how you think about everything we have covered so far. The real question is not whether 5 grams of creatine works. There are now over 300 peer-reviewed studies confirming it is safe and effective across a wide range of populations. The real question that nobody asks out loud is this: why has nobody told you? Why at your last physical did your physician not mention that a safe, widely available, inexpensive compound could be actively reducing the neuroinflammation inside your brain, reactivating autophagy, and supporting the production of new functional mitochondria starting within the first few weeks? The answer is not a conspiracy. The answer is a medical system designed to manage symptoms rather than address the root mechanics of cellular aging. And for millions of people over 65 who are quietly losing energy, clarity, and independence one day at a time while being told it is just their age, that gap is costing them something they cannot get back. Every day, without this cellular support, your body keeps sending fewer repair signals, fewer autophagy signals, fewer mitochondrial renewal signals. That process does not fix itself. But it can be reversed, and more quickly than most people who have accepted their situation believe is possible. Here is the exact protocol: 5 grams of creatine monohydrate. Every morning, with a meal or immediately before one, dissolved in water, juice, or coffee. Heat does not degrade creatine monohydrate, and contrary to what you may have heard, caffeine does not meaningfully cancel its effects when taken together. 5 grams is the maintenance dose validated by decades of safety research across tens of thousands of participants in multiple countries. It is not a megadose. It does not require a loading phase for the neurological and cellular effects we are discussing. It is safe for kidney function in people with normal renal health. It does not require cycling on and off, and unlike many supplements marketed to older adults, it has no meaningful interaction risk with the most commonly prescribed medications for people in the 65 to 80 age range, including blood pressure medications, statins, and common anti-inflammatories. Here is what is happening inside your body from the moment you begin taking it consistently. Creatine enters your brain through specific membrane transporters and raises intracellular phosphocreatine levels in neurons. This accomplishes two things almost immediately. First, it reduces the energy deficit in brain cells. That is the primary trigger for microglial overactivation, which is the root cause of neuroinflammation. When neurons have sufficient energy reserves, the microglia no longer receive the distress signals that put them into that chronic inflammatory state. Second, it stabilizes mitochondrial membrane potential. When the mitochondrial membrane is stable, the cell stops producing the reactive oxygen species and distress signals that both perpetuate inflammation and suppress autophagy. When that suppression is lifted, the autophagy machinery in your cells, which was always there waiting, begins to function again. The recycling system restarts. The accumulated debris begins to clear, and the mitochondria, now stabilized and no longer under constant oxidative stress, begin the process of biogenesis, producing new, functional copies of themselves. That is what the thumbnail means when it says new mitochondria. Not metaphorically, literally. The research shows that sustained creatine supplementation in adults over 60 promotes mitochondrial biogenesis through a pathway involving PGC1-alpha, the master regulator of mitochondrial renewal. Your body builds new mitochondria, the ones that were failing, that were producing energy inefficiently and leaking inflammatory signals, get cleared by the reactivated autophagy system, and new ones take their place. This is measurable. This is documented. And it begins in weeks, not months. I spoke with Robert, 68 years old, retired engineer from Colorado. He had been managing what his neurologist described as mild cognitive sluggishness. He was told to exercise more, sleep better, stay mentally active. He was already doing all three of those things. He added 5 grams of creatine monohydrate to his morning routine and tracked his own experience for 12 weeks. At week 4, the mental fog he had stopped noticing because he had accepted it as normal was beginning to lift. He noticed he was finishing his morning reading faster. He noticed he was retaining what he read. At week 8, he described his thinking as feeling less effortful. At week 12, he told me the most meaningful change was not a cognitive benchmark. It was that he stopped dreading his mornings. He woke up and felt like the day was something he was moving toward, not something he was surviving. This is the moment in this video where I want to ask you something directly. Comment the word brain below. If mental clarity, sharper memory, and reducing brain fog is your biggest priority right now, comment the word energy if fatigue, physical stamina, and having more of yourself back through the day is what you most want to reclaim. I read every single comment, and your answer is going to shape the next episode of this series directly, because I want to cover what matters most to the people watching, not what I assume is most important. Before you go, I promised you something extra. One thing you can do today, not next week, today, that amplifies the autophagy boosting effect of creatine during the first 2 to 3 weeks. Take your 5 grams in the morning within a 10 to 12 hour fasted window. This does not mean skipping breakfast. It means taking your creatine when you first wake up, waiting 20 to 30 minutes, and then eating your first meal. That brief fasted window matters because autophagy is naturally more active during periods of lower insulin signaling. Insulin is one of the primary signals that tells your cells they do not need to recycle anything right now because nutrients are available. When insulin is lower, which it naturally is after a night of sleep, your cells are primed to run the recycling process. When creatine enters your cells in that window, they are already in a state of heightened autophagy readiness. The combination of fasting-primed autophagy and creatine-supported mitochondrial stability creates a reinforcing effect that most people taking creatine never experience, simply because nobody told them timing matters. The mitochondria are more receptive. The cellular cleanup is already underway. And the creatine acts as a stabilizing force that keeps that process running longer and more efficiently than it would on its own. The people who report feeling something in weeks 2 and 3 rather than waiting until week 6 are almost always the ones who added this one simple timing adjustment. You do not need to do anything extreme. You do not need to fast for 24 hours or change your diet dramatically. 20 to 30 minutes between your creatine and your first meal. That is the entire adjustment. And if even that feels like too much change to make all at once, start where you are. Start today with your coffee, with your water, however it fits into your morning. Adjust the timing as the habit settles in. Consistency matters more than perfection at every single step. Here is what I want you to take away from everything we covered today. Your brain is not just aging, it is inflamed. And that inflammation is not a permanent sentence. Your mitochondria are not just slowing down, they are sending distress signals that suppress the very repair system your body was designed to use. And your autophagy is not gone. It is waiting to be reactivated. 5 grams, 1 teaspoon, every morning, consistently. That is where this begins. Small steps repeated over weeks create the kind of change you can actually feel. Not months from now, weeks. Early signals. Real ones. The same signals that Margaret noticed at 6 weeks. The same ones Robert noticed at 4. You do not have to do this alone. And you do not have to wait long to start feeling the difference. If this helped even a little, hit like, it takes 1 second and it helps someone else your age find this information. Someone who may be sitting exactly where you were when you clicked on this video. Share this with someone you care about who has been struggling with fatigue, brain fog, or that quiet sense that their body is not keeping up the way it once did. You might give them something their doctor has not yet mentioned. Subscribe so you do not miss the next episode. What I am covering next is directly connected to what we talked about today. And if this surprised you, the next one is going to completely change how you understand cellular aging after 65. Consistency matters more than intensity. Always. Small steps repeated. That is the pattern that changes everything. And the fact that you are still here tells me you are already doing the most important thing. You are starting